You know that feeling when you get a bill and it's got all these different numbers, discounts, taxes, and you're just kind of staring at it wondering, wait, how did they even get to this final number? Well, today we're going to crack that code together. We're going to take a real-world problem and just break it down step by step until every single calculation makes perfect sense. Okay, let's dive right in. So, this is our challenge. It's a bill from a dealer in Delhi to a wholesaler in Agra. And as you can see, we've got 3 different items, a GST tax, and a discount thrown in there just to make things a little more interesting. Our mission together is to figure out that final total amount. Looking at all these numbers at once can definitely feel a bit overwhelming, right? But the key to not getting confused is to have a solid plan. So we're going to map out a clear, logical path that takes us straight from this problem to the final answer. And here's our roadmap. It's super simple. First, we'll set up the problem. Then, we'll tackle that discount. After that, we'll figure out our pre-tax total, calculate the GST, and finally, we'll put it all together for the final bill. See? 5 easy steps. Let's get started. All right, first things first. Before we can start calculating anything, we need to know exactly what we're working with. That means we're going to pull out all of the key pieces of information and just lay them out nice and clear. So, let's break this down. We've got 3 main things to deal with. First, the costs of our 3 items, 2,100, 3,500, and 2,200 rupees. Second, there's a 12% GST that applies to everything. And third, and this is the little curveball, we have a 25% discount, but it only applies to that last item. Okay, now, for what is probably the single most important rule when you're dealing with discounts and taxes. Listen up. You always apply the discount first. The tax is only calculated on the final price after the discount has been taken off. This is absolutely key. So let's walk through this calculation. The item's original cost is 2,200 rupees. The discount is 25%. So to find the actual discount in rupees, we just multiply 2,200 by 0.25, which gives us 550. And then we just subtract that 550 from the original price. And that gives us 1,650 rupees. That's the new discounted price for that one item. Perfect. Our first big calculation is done and dusted. Great. Now that we've handed the discount, we're ready for our next big step. We need to combine the costs of all the goods to get a subtotal. And remember, this is the total value before we add any tax. So here are our final costs all lined up. We've got the first 2 items at their original prices, and we're adding in our third item at its new discounted price of 1,650. It's these 3 numbers that we need to add together to get our subtotal. So let's do that simple addition. The cost of item 1 plus item 2 plus the newly discounted cost of item 3. What do we get? The answer is 7,250 rupees. And that right there is our pre-tax total, or our subtotal. This is the super important number that the goods and services tax, the GST, is going to be based on. All right, we have our subtotal locked in. Now it's time to figure out the tax. Let's go ahead and calculate that 12% GST that needs to be added on top. So just a quick refresher, GST, or goods and services tax, is basically a value-added tax. And the critical part for our problem is that it's calculated on the final taxable value of the goods, which is that subtotal we just figured out. You know, the process here is pretty much exactly like how we calculated the discount. We start with our pre-tax total of 7,250. We know the GST rate is 12%, so we just multiply our subtotal by 0.12, and that'll give us the total tax amount. And that calculation gives us a total GST of 870 rupees. This is it. This is the final piece of the puzzle we need before we can put together the grand total. We are on the home stretch. We've got our subtotal and we've got our tax. All that's left to do is combine them to find the final amount that the wholesaler actually has to pay. Let's do it. This is exactly how a final bill is structured, you know? You start with a subtotal for all the stuff you bought, and then you add the tax right on top. So let's add them up. What's 7,250 plus 870? The grand total of the bill is 8,120 rupees. And there you have it. We started with a problem that looked kind of complicated, but just by following a few simple steps, we found our final answer. Awesome. So, what are the big lessons here? First, and this is the most important one, discounts always come off before you add any taxes. Second, the tax is always calculated on that new discounted subtotal. And finally, really, the best way to solve any tricky problem like this is to just break it down into small, logical steps. And that's really all there is to it. That's how you crack the code of a commercial bill. But hey, before you go, here's a little challenge for you. Using the exact same steps we just followed, can you figure out how the final bill would change if that discount was only 10%? Give it a try for yourself. Thanks for joining me.